For my birthday this year, my friends and I went to go see a drag show performance, something that we always like to go do every now and then because it's just fun. Drag queens are fun and awesome to watch, so highly recommend. But I also, while we were there, got to meet one of my mutuals that I've had for a while now. I'm not exactly sure how long, but her name is Jade X. I can't say her full name here. YouTube will demonetize me, so. But she is literally so sweet and funny and was just very kind when I got to talk to her. And while we were talking, I suggested that I would like to make her own one-of-a-kind custom Monster High doll. I asked her to send me her 4 favorite looks, preferably ones that she thinks I could turn into a doll, because sometimes it's just too difficult to scale things down to the right size that I need. But I chose this beautiful mermaid fish-esque look. I keep saying mermaid, also very like human glam model Laguna Blue, kind of, I guess, if I had to bring it back to Monster High. So I'm really excited for you guys to see how this doll turned out, so let's get started. So I'm going to be using a Laguna Blue from G1 of Monster High for this custom today, but I'm actually not going to be using her head mold. I'm going to be using one from Perry and Pearl because I think Laguna's facial features are really soft and not really what I'm looking for today's project. So I've chosen Perry or Pearl, I can't remember which one specifically, and I'm gonna get started by prepping the doll for customizing like usual, cutting off all of the hair, removing the inside plugs, and glue with some needle nose pliers, and you know, all the usual. I'm using some nylon hair from Shimmerlocks for the reroute today. I'll be sure to link their shop in the description. And of course I'm painting the scalp to match the new hair color. We don't want her to have a blue scalp or else you'd be able to see that through the plugs and it's very distracting. This reroute was pretty simple considering that I didn't have to do any extra rooting like bangs or following a different part line. Everything was standard and following all the holes already in the head from its original rooting. Of course, it still does take forever, so if you're rerouting, I suggest to put on some movies, a TV show, listen to a podcast to make things go a little bit smoother. As usual, to seal in the new nylon hair, I am using some Fabri-Tac glue, squeezing that in through the neck hole, and then I like to rub it around with a Q-tip inside. Usually squeezing the head afterwards can result in some hair falling out, I've experienced, so I don't like to do that. For this doll's hairstyle, I initially did these braids that I also did on Chapel because I thought they would give me the curl that I wanted, but actually it didn't turn out how I wanted, so I ended up doing a totally different method later. So these braids are basically completely pointless, but I tried. So of course I'm putting the head back onto the body because we are going to get started on the face-up now, starting off using 100% acetone and some Q-tips to remove all of the factory paint and some staining that was on this doll. Of course, because I get them all secondhand, they come a little banged up, which is fine. I'm not worried about it. What I like about Perry and Pearl's face mold is that they have the gills on their nose as well as some scales around the brow bone that I thought would add to a little extra cool detail when doing this face up. Something that I wish Laguna had, but unfortunately she does not. This custom is going to be a full body repaint, meaning I am taking some watered down acrylic paint and fully covering the face and body. This process takes a long time, several coats of paint because I'm using it watered down acrylics. It takes time to build up the opacity. Obviously, I'm trying to avoid any visible or heavy brush strokes and trying to keep the layers all very thin. I sealed the entire body with some Liquitex High Gloss varnish, so it still kind of looks like plastic, just for a stylistic choice really, and also to try and help keep the paint sealed on there longer. I'm still sticking with my usual method of using a mechanical pencil to do the sketch layer of the face up. This has just always been my go-to way and helps me get a thin line for the sketch layer that is easy to cover up when I go in with acrylic paints. And for this face up, I'm doing what I said I wanted to do in the last video, which is a very fierce expression. So I'm not really following the eye mold very well, or, well, I mean, purposely, I'm not following the eye mold for this. So she'll have slightly smaller eyes, but that is because the makeup is very bold for this face, and I'm very, very excited to do this makeup look. I think that it is going to look really awesome. For specific details, I sometimes like to go in and use a watercolor pencil for the sketch layer instead of my mechanical pencil. I do this because if I am not covering it up with black acrylic paint, sometimes it's a little bit harder to cover up that dark mechanical pencil with the acrylic. And you might be able to see it like on the outside lines still, so I like to use a similar color to the paints that I'll be using later on. Then I take my chalk pastels and add a lot of blush onto the cheekbones of this doll. I think a healthy, considerable, good amount. Like when I add blush onto faces that I have fully repainted with acrylic paint, I feel like it helps add more dimension and bring a little liveliness back into the face. I think I've said this before, but the face feels very flat when it is all just one color everywhere. I'm also using some chalk pastel to add a bit of contour onto this face because it matches the makeup better in my opinion, and also, again, brings some more definition and lifelikeness into the face. I keep using that word. I don't know if that's a good description for what I'm doing. It's like doing a painting. I mean, I don't know. If you were painting like a figure, you wouldn't want it to all be one color on the outfit. You would have like some shadows to add more definition. Sometimes I question if what I'm saying makes any sense, but I think it looks really good on the forehead and around the cheekbones, so yeah, I like it. I also tried my best to replicate Jade's nose contour because I think that trying my best to replicate the makeup will make this doll look even more like her. So I tried my best. I used my smallest brush I have for doing the nose contour, and I'm also adding some highlighter just for an extra sparkle and shimmer. I add this between every single spray of Mr. Super Clear because the sparkle gets a little bit diluted when you use a matte sealant on top of it, but I wanted that shimmer and shine to be very apparent. And now I am moving on to acrylic paint. I like to start off with black most of the time, so that way if I make any mistakes, I can cover it up with other colors of paint as I go. Typically the eyelashes are my biggest struggle as they are so tiny. It is very difficult to get them in a very thin pointed line without messing up now and then. And then I like to go in with my white acrylic paint. Again, it's kind of the same thing as using black. It's very obvious when you make mistakes with white acrylic paint as well, so I like to get that out of the way so I can also cover up any mistakes, usually with more black. I used several reference images to recreate Jade's makeup look for this doll, and following those, I'm trying to color match to the best of my ability for the lipstick and the eyeshadow. Eyebrows have slowly become one of my favorite parts of doing a face-up, mostly because I feel like they are very definitive in what the expression tends to look like. Obviously, the eyes are also a major factor, but if you have raised eyebrows on a more sultry, seductive eye, then it completely changes what the expression looks like. I'm using a very light blue acrylic paint for the irises. It almost appears white on camera. I just wanted to make that apparent because, again, it does look very white. So on an earlier layer in the face-up process, I used some chalk pastel to lay out the basic shape of the eyeshadow for this doll, and now I'm going to completely paint over that using acrylic paint. When I lay out the basic eyeshadow shape with chalk pastel, I like to take a kneaded eraser to make any sharp lines. And like you see on this one, it's more of a winged look, so I needed the kneaded eraser to make sure it was very clean cut. And for one of my finishing details for the eyes, I like to take a nail art dotting tool to try and get a perfect little tiny circle right in the eyes. And I know I typically don't like to gloss the eyes of my face-ups because I think it ruins how the doll looks on camera. There's like a lot of reflection. I did find some Liquitex satin finish varnish that I am trying out for this custom and hoping that it doesn't make the eyes too glossy. And of course, for the lips, I'm sticking with my high gloss varnish because I love to make the lips really glossy. And now moving on to what I think is the coolest part of this makeup look is that Jade has all of these face gems on for this makeup look, and I tried my best to find some that were in a similar design but a much smaller scale. Obviously, they're still a little large. There is really no there's no fighting the scaling issue when it comes to making dolls at this scale. To add the gems to this doll's face, I am taking a little dab of super glue onto the end of a toothpick, and then to easily grab the gems I've selected, I'm using a white colored pencil to kind of pick them up and place them. I was slightly nervous that they would not be symmetrical and that this would ruin the entire face if I had to do over any of the gems, but I think I did pretty well in the symmetry aspect. Of course, it's never gonna look perfect. I'm sure I don't even draw the faces perfectly symmetrical. I mean, it's a very, like, that is a crazy thing to be able to do, but I try my best. And here is how the finished face up turned out. I'm super proud of how this face up looks. I love the very fierce expression with all of the added detailed bedazzlements. I think she is like a ethereal mermaid goddess, is what she's giving right now. And let's get started on some of the other details. So I'm going to be trying to do some clay sculpting by hand for this doll. I know clay is not really my specialty as seen prior on this channel, but for her mermaid fin ears, I'm taking some wire to create like a little armature base, and then I covered that in a little sliver of tinfoil just to use as like a little filler so I don't have to completely fill out the ears with clay, even though they are very small. This is probably a step I didn't necessarily need to take, but I wanted the clay to kind of adhere to something. And this was air dry clay, so once I fully sculpted out the details, I tried to do some light sanding, which was a little difficult because these are so tiny. But then I am painting with some acrylic paint to match the skin tone, and the reference photo for the ears are pink and purple at the end. I also used a little bit of chalk pastel to try and better blend the pink and purple into the skin tone, and then I sealed that in with some Mr. Super Clear and sealed it in again with some high gloss varnish, and then added them to the face with some super glue. Here I'm taking out the braids for this doll's hairstyle. Again, these braids are basically like, it doesn't even matter because I completely redid the hairstyle differently later on. But you can still see how these curls turned out. I used a straw curl method for the finished hairstyle. If you want to know how I did that, I'll leave a link in the description below to someone else's video that explains it much better. I bought some materials online that we'll be using for today's outfit for this doll, starting off with this rainbow tinsel that'll be added as a little fringe at the bottom of the dress, and these iridescent sequins that are very tiny. They will be covering the entire dress. So here's how the rainbow tinsel fringe turned out. I kind of just glued that on the other side. And then these sequins, which took very, very long. I didn't film any of it because it took so long. I glued them on in a scaling pattern and then trimmed any excess to keep the shape of the dress. I used some embroidery thread for the drawstrings, and then I hand sewed these tiny little pink seashell bralettes that'll be going underneath the dress. The shoes for this doll are the only thing that are not completely accurate to Jade's look. I think these are Boo York Caddy Noir's shoes. Someone will correct me if I'm wrong. I'll look it up though. I cut off this excess part at the top and then just turned them into some strappy heels that I then painted to match the rest of her outfit. I covered the shoe with a layer of some dragonfly glaze to add a little extra glitter to the whole thing. And with some other details that I did off camera, this doll is done! So let's do the final reveal. I hope that you enjoyed watching this video today of me making this doll for Jade. Of course, I hope Jade loves the doll as well, and if you'd like to check out her socials, I will leave the links in the description. And as always, thank you so much to all of my Patreon members for making videos like this possible. I post behind the scenes on what I'm working on over there. You get to see YouTube videos like this before they go up on my channel, and early access to dolls available in my shop. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Bye!